Hello, 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 and welcome to Building Bridges, Enhancing Family Communication. I am so excited to have you back for yet another wonderful workshop brought to you by the Well Counseling and Consulting Group and our partnership with the Redeemer 4-H Fund. I want to thank you so much for joining us. We've had a really great time with this series. If you haven't watched all of the series, I want you to go back and watch those. There's some great resources for parents who are looking to help their children develop, help their children's mental health, and be a great member of our community. So we are really proud of our partnership with Redeemer Presbyterian Church, which includes the 4-H Fund that they created to support mental health treatment for people of color. And so I thank you for your participation today. Our goals for today are really very simple. This is a conversation about communication. So it's really all about making sure that we understand some of these basics, that we have some active listening skills and techniques that you can use and that you can help your children to use. And then we're going to explore a few strategies to kind of resolve some conflicts. As with all of our workshops that we have presented under this kind of umbrella, we're talking specifically to parents. So we have you in mind when we create this. But please do understand, this information can be used for not only your kids, whether they be young, adolescent or adults, but also can be used in connection with other family members, other friends, people at work. So these skills that we're going to be talking about really are beneficial, and a lot of them will apply in more ways than one. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer, the same one that we have given each time that we've had this workshop. We are providing information that we would call psychoeducational, meaning that it's supposed to help you improve your mental health and well-being by having skills and practices and techniques. However, we are not your therapist. We can be, we'll talk about that at the end today, but we are not giving you specific information about your situation. If you have specific concerns, like I said, stick around to the end of this video today, and we'll make sure that we give you some very specific recommendations about places where you can get support, our office being one of those places. But we always recommend seeking the guidance of a qualified mental health professional whenever you have specific concerns about your needs. If you are not familiar with this face, this is me. My name is Kavalyn Day. I am the Director of Operations here at the Well Counseling and Consulting Group, lead consultant and one of the staff coaches as well. I am a former school counselor, a parent of 4, a grandparent of 4. So when it comes to communication with your children and the stresses of parenting and how to navigate those to help your children achieve and be successful and have a high quality of life, this is something that I know very well and that is very near and dear to my heart. This is one of the kind of quotes or thoughts or ideas that I really want to drop for you guys, because I want you to be thinking along this line. When we talk about communication, one of the most important parts of communication is hearing the parts of what is not being said. And I want you to think about that for a second. If you are a parent who is looking to improve communication with your child, or maybe a co-parent or a spouse, and you're saying like, man, it just seems like we just can't quite get it together. We just seem to be having this miscommunication. It seems like every time we start having the conversation, there's a conflict of some sort, or a problem of some sort. If that is what you are saying, I want you to understand one of the most important things that you can do is not just listen to the exact words that are being said, but listen to the meaning of what is being conveyed. And that is a skill that some of us have organically, but that is a skill that can be learned. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So when I say communication, what exactly do I mean? So this is just the plain old Webster's dictionary of what is communication. It's a very, very simple thing. It is simply the exchange of information, right? Webster says a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, and behaviors. Now, that little piece right there, a common system of symbols, signs, and behaviors, that is actually very, very important, because when we're talking about communicating with our children or communicating with our partner or our co-parent, we might be thinking we're on the same wavelength, but we are actually speaking through two different systems, two different symbols, two different signs. Now, if you have ever looked at your kids' text messages and you thought, I don't even know what the devil this means. What does this mean? What does this symbol mean? What is these letters? That doesn't even look like a word. You know that there are times when there are other symbols that can be used to convey something, whether that be an emoji or what have you, right? Sometimes there is body language or behavior that is communicating, but basically we are talking about, when we talk about communication, we're talking about that information that is being exchanged between individuals. And we're a mental health agency, right? We talk about mental health and well-being. Why should we care about communication? Well, here's why this is so important for you as a parent, you as a grandparent, someone who is loving and caring for children. Communication actually builds trust and that respect, that mutual respect that you want to have with your children. Right? If you can think back to our definition here, if you are not able to exchange information, if you don't have a shared system of passing that along, it will be really hard for people to trust or respect, right? And so when we have good communication, it's easier for us to do that, which can enhance that understanding and that empathy, right? Which is what builds those long-term relationships where children feel like they are rooted and they are grounded and they have the support that they need. It also can reduce some of those conflicts. So if you feel like you're walking on eggshells in your house, if you feel like everybody in your life is just frustrated and unhappy, if you feel like you're constantly having to defend yourself or address some misunderstanding, it may be that the communication needs to improve, right? It absolutely, and this is why we chose this as one of our topics for this series, it absolutely strengthens that parent and child relationship. I don't know about you, but if you don't feel like you and the person, whether it be a child, a friend, a family member, if you don't feel like you all can communicate, that's generally a relationship that we would say is not very healthy, right? So if you want to have a strong parent and child relationship, if that's important to you, right? I want you to understand that this piece, the communication piece, is very, very important. It also creates a healthy environment for the whole family, right? A home that is filled with strife or miscommunication or people who are walking on eggshells and don't want to talk and don't want to share, don't trust or feel comfortable to be open about what they feel, that is not a healthy environment. And things like that will create more stress, more overwhelm, more feelings of anxiety, more feelings of depression. So we want to make sure that we have a supportive environment. Communication is foundational, right? And then it's important to understand that when we don't have good communication, when there is a lack of healthy communication, it can create over time damage to those relationships, right? So if you think about like a foundation that's being eroded, or like the side of a mountain that's being eroded by water just constantly hitting up against it, when you're having those on again, off again conflicts, those misunderstandings, those, oh, what did you mean by that? Those kind of things, it does wear down and damage a relationship. And this can contribute to a mental health diagnosis as well, or it can exacerbate or create symptoms of a mental health diagnosis. So while we're talking about talking, let's not think that this is just a little thing. It really is a foundational key to your overall mental health and well-being. So which one of these sounds familiar to you? Right? Oh, they never listen to me. They always tell me what to do and they never ask me what I even think. I feel like I'm not even being heard. Everything turns into some long lecture. They don't even understand what I'm going through, right? Or maybe does it sound like you? They don't tell me what's going on in their lives. I feel like I'm talking to a wall. They only respond with fine or nothing when I ask questions, or maybe even just one letter, right? They seem to tune me out or get defensive anytime I want to have a conversation. It is so hard to connect with them. Here's the thing. As you're looking at this screen, you might think that, our first list, that is mostly children, and that the second list is mostly the parents. But the truth of the matter is, in terms of a relationship, very often Parents and children feel the same. If you look at kind of the root causes beneath what some of these phrases that may be happening, that you may be saying, that you may be hearing, some of these root causes are the same, right? They never listen to me. Sounds a lot like I'm talking to a wall, right? They always tell me what to do and never ask what I think. Sounds a lot like they don't tell me what's going on in their lives. Everything turns into a lecture. Sounds a lot like they seem to tune me out or get defensive. And so very often you as a parent and your child actually want the same thing. They want to be listened to, they want to be heard. They want to be talked to and not talked at. They want to engage in a conversation, not a lecture. They want to feel understood and be able to understand. So the first thing that I really want you to recognize today is that you and your child have a lot of the same root desires. Even if it feels like you're on totally different pages, even if it feels like it's not working, even if it feels like, man, this just isn't fitting at all. You and your child probably have very, very similar beliefs, very similar desires, and maybe some of the same concerns that are causing problems in your communication. So what we want to go for is something called clear and honest communication. And with this, I want you to use simple and direct language with your child. Now, this is obviously very reflective of the age and stage of development of your child. The direct, simple, clear language that you're going to use with your 17-year-old or your 27-year-old is obviously going to be different from what you're going to say to your 2-year-old or your 5-year-old. But you want to make sure that you're using open, clear communication with your children that is direct, right? We want you to be honest, but we want you to make sure that you are speaking to your child based upon their age and stage of development. One thing that we see a lot, and I see this very, very often in parents who were what I call parentified as a child, your perspective of what is developmentally appropriate for your child may be off. And here's what I mean by that. If you were as a child expected to be very mature, expected to handle things that really probably a child shouldn't have had to handle, if you were, maybe had a parent or co-parent or, extended family member who talked to you as if you were a part of the parenting process. If you had maybe you were older sibling and you maybe had younger siblings and you were responsible for taking care of them, you probably have a different perspective of what is developmentally appropriate for your children, right? And so you want to make sure that you keep track of that. So I would encourage you to even just look online and look at some of the different things like, hey, is this developmentally appropriate? Should I expect them to be able to do this? Do I have maybe unrealistic expectations? Kind of temper that. So make sure that you're being very, very clear with the communication that you have. And this is one that I have to work on all the time myself. You want to avoid using sarcasm, right? Because not all children can pick up on that. And for some kids, if the sarcasm or the criticism kind of leans towards something where they maybe have an insecurity, it actually can come across as even more harsh or more harmful. So you want to make sure that you're using clear communication whenever possible. Now, if I was in person with you right now, I would be doing something called a drawing exercise. I'm going to talk you through what that looks like. So I have here on the screen a picture, and you can look at this picture. And if I were to ask you to describe this picture, you're probably going to use some words, right? You might talk about the colors, you might talk about the shapes, you might talk about the lines. You might talk about how things overlap. You're going to have different ways of describing this, right? Now, when I do this exercise in public, what I do is I say, I want two people to work together and I want you to sit back to back so that you're not seeing what the other person is drawing. One person looks at this picture and they verbally describe it, and the other person has to draw what they hear the other person saying. More times than not, I've done this exercise many, many times, and I will tell you, probably 80 or 90% of the time, the picture looks nothing like what was actually on the paper to begin with. And that's not because people weren't listening, it's because we don't often communicate as clearly as we think we are. We very often think like, oh, well, I explained it perfectly, but you're explaining from your perspective. The person is hearing from their perspective. And so what can happen is, oh, that wasn't as clear as I thought it was. I didn't realize that, right? And so you want to make sure you are practicing clarity when you're communicating with your kids. Having a kid who doesn't understand what you're saying or doesn't maybe understand the why behind what you're saying can lead to miscommunications and frustration. So if you have a child and you feel like, man, it just seems like they don't ever want to listen, ask yourself if you are being as clear as you can, and ask yourself if they are receiving it the same way you're giving it. So one of the things that I like to do with especially older kids, but definitely I've even done it with younger kids too, I have them repeat back to me what they heard. Okay. So I need you to do this, this, and this, right? Tell me what you heard me say. And I kid you not, guys. Very often, kids will not hear it the way that you described it, right? And this is even more challenging. So if you have a child who has maybe a diagnosis like an anxiety or a depression or an ADHD or something that might impact their ability to focus, or process information, or even the speed at which they focus or process information, that can actually contribute to that miscommunication as well. So taking just an extra minute or two to clarify can go a long way to reducing some of those conflicts in your home. The next step after you've been really clear with your children is you want to empathize and validate what you hear. As you're being clear with them and you're expressing things to them, they might come in and be willing to open up things. So the first thing is you want to acknowledge your child's feelings without judgment. This can be a challenge, especially if you did not receive empathy or validation as a child. Let me say that again. It can be challenging to empathize and validate your child's feelings if you did not receive empathy and validation as a child. What can happen is you can be frustrated with the fact that they are, seemingly being emotional. You can feel defensive as if they are judging you or blaming you. You can also feel, anxious or worried because you're trying to create more of a peace or a more positive emotion for them, and that's not what's happening. So you want to acknowledge your child's feelings without judgment because it doesn't need to be judged. So something really simple might be, I can see why you feel that way, right? Or wow, that does sound like that's pretty tough. That is acknowledging what they're saying. And you may not agree with it, because understand you're not going to always agree with it, right? But you want to avoid dismissing their emotion with phrases like, oh, you're overreacting, or that's not a big deal. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand on that, although you can, because I'm not watching you. But if you've ever said something like that, that can really shut down a child. So if you have a child, you're saying like, well, they don't talk to me, I don't know what's going on with them. Sometimes at some point in the past, what has happened is they have come to you with something that they wanted some support with, and maybe they have felt dismissed. Now, I've also seen this occur where a child, because of their own anxiety and kind of their internal dialogue, they assume that you would not empathize or validate, and so they avoid that. So again, that is one of those things where you want to go above and beyond to make sure that you're expressing how you understand, and that you are definitely, empathizing with what they are experiencing. Now, of course, there's going to be times when the child has gotten out of line, and it's time for you to have kind of a disciplined conversation, right? When correction is necessary, I want you to first connect, then correct. And what I mean by that is you want to connect with the child where they are, what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, what they're seeing, what they're saying, what they're doing. You want to connect with them on a personal level and then offer the correction. I talk about something a lot of times with parents, I call it behavior safety net. And it's, if you see your child doing something you don't want them to do, or see them, or observe them maybe doing something that you think is not in their best interest, you want to name and normalize any emotions that you see first. You want to express to them that you understand where they're coming from. I can see why you'd feel that way. And then you want to correct them. That T is teach them. how you want them to respond, right? So if this were a younger child, maybe having a temper tantrum because they lost a toy, I might say, man, you are so angry that you had to give up your toy. I am sorry that that happened. I know it's hard when you really want to keep playing and it's time to go. But when it's time for us to leave, we have to leave so that we can get where we need to go on time. But you know what? You can't ask if we can come back and play again later, or we can come back on a different day, right? So it's just that simple. It doesn't have to take a long time. It does take a few extra words, but we're talking about teaching them and communicating with them. So you want to make sure that you're connecting first and then correct. One of the biggest problems that we see in communication is that we're often listening not to understand, but to reply. And that's, that this quote from Stephen Covey, the biggest communication problem we do not listen to understand, we listen to reply. That quote has been shared lots and lots of times, but it really can ring true, because when we are listening, we are in our own mind formulating what we want to say next, rather than really connecting with the emotion that the person is expressing to us. And in terms of communication, that's the key. We want to make sure that we hear not only what is being said, but remember, we want to hear what is not being said as well. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to be active listeners. Now, this one can be a challenge, especially if you have lots going on, you're very busy, you're kind of running and going and doing, and you might find yourself saying like, man, I never have a spare second. So I'm always trying to multitask. That is really hard to do and practice active listenings. So you want to make sure that you're showing genuine interest in what your child is saying, right? And because you're also modeling that for them so that they'll do the same for you when you're communicating with them. You want to make eye contact, nod, and use encouraging phrases like "I see" or "Tell me more." Now, if you've had therapy in the past, you've probably heard that, because this is a classic therapist move. When I would talk to parents when I was a school counselor, I would always say like, you can steal our little techniques. They're not hard to do. But if you want to get your kids to talk to you the way that they talk to us, that's one of those things that we do. We practice what's called minimal encouragers, right? We are encouraging them to continue to communicate with us by showing them that we're actually paying attention. As a mom, what I have noticed a lot of times is sometimes I want to interrupt, or I want to jump in with a solution so that I can erase that pain that my child is feeling, or, eliminate the problem. But the truth of the matter is that's not always what they want or what is needed in that situation. So you want to make sure that you're listening for the feelings behind the facts. If you want to have relationships with your teenagers where they continue to listen to you, where you maintain your position in their circle of influence, you have got to get really good at listening for the feeling behind the fact. And sometimes the fact is not a fact that you even agree with, but the feeling is one where you can connect with the child. And as you get really good at this active listening, you want to start to reflect and rephrase to confirm that you are understanding correctly. So let's when you are giving that reflection to your kids, you want to make sure that you are rephrasing what they say, offering them like, is this what you meant? It sounds like you're frustrated. Is that right? So you want to give the reflection to confirm that understanding. You want to make sure that you are confirming as much as possible, giving choices and encouraging their input. This is something that we definitely want to make sure that we are doing with our kiddos so that they feel like there's a purpose to the communication. Remember, communication is an exchange of information. If I don't feel like you care about what I'm saying or doing, I don't have any reason to talk to you, right? So you want to make sure that you are giving choices and encouraging that input. Offer your child choices wherever they are possible so that they feel like they're involved in this process. Ask for their opinion, right? And sometimes it can even go a little step further. Tell me more about why you chose that, instead of asking why, right? If you feel like maybe they're on the wrong track or it's not quite what you were expecting, respond. Don't react, because you want to encourage that communication, right? Very, very often teenagers will tell me, especially, I don't want to talk to my mom because I know she's going to blow up. I don't want to talk to my mom because I know she's going to have a fit. I don't want to talk to my dad because he's going to kill me. Like you want to make sure that you are tempering your response because that can prevent your child from communicating with you in the future. And then obviously we want to have something called positive reinforcement and encouragement for that communication. So very often our kids are they're children. So this is a work in progress. They are learning. So you want to acknowledge not only when they do it really well, but the effort. I had a conversation with one of my teenagers just this week, and I said, I really appreciate that you're expressing that to me. Here's what, are you interested in what I would like to see next, or what would help me in this situation? I hear what you're saying, and I think that this shows to me an improvement. I think this is something you're doing better than you used to. And I'm continuing to work too. So we are work in progress together, but acknowledging those efforts, acknowledging those areas where things have improved, even if it's not 100%, kids are not machines, right? They are not going to get it perfectly every single time. Even when there's a skill that they have acquired and they have mastered that skill, there can be moments when they still misstep because that is what childhood is about. So you want to regularly praise those efforts and not just those successes. You also want to make sure that you're giving them affection and appreciation, and pay attention to how your kid likes to receive those things, right? So maybe you're saying, I work so hard for my child to have everything that they need. And they don't want another pair of shoes. They don't want another dress. What they want is to sit on the couch with you and watch a movie, right? So expressing affection and appreciation in unique ways. And sometimes that means like, hey, I really think that you did a great job. I'd love to give you a reward for that. I'd love to show you that, I appreciate what you did. What would you like to do? What would you like to have? When you're giving your children feedback, make sure that it's constructive and not something that is prescriptive, right? So, hey, you might think about it, when this happened to me, I tried, fill in the blank, right? As opposed to you better do this or that. It is not wrong to give your children a directive, but you do want to reduce that directive language if you can, because you're looking to have a two-way street of communication. And if you're always telling them, that can definitely shut down on that. Okay, so let's do a little active listening practice here, okay? So if your child were to say, I hate school, it's boring, how would you respond to that? Pause the video if you're watching the recording for a second and just kind of think, if my child were to say, I hate school, it's boring, how would you respond to that? Now, as a parent, my first reaction might be like, oh, whatever, it's not that big of a deal, or it's not that bad. Well, I mean, nobody really loves school, but you got to do what you got to do, those kind of things. That's not going to encourage healthy communication, right? So your first response might be like, oh, you're not liking school right now. I wonder what's going on. What's changed? What's different, right? Because that's going to bring more dialogue, right? You want to ask those open-ended questions. So a closed-ended question might be one that ends in a yes or no answer, right? Whereas an open-ended question is going to ask them to think a little bit more and give you some more specifics. So they might say, well, math, I hate math and I'm never going to use it. And I was like, well, I don't know the last time I used trigonometry, but sometimes it can be helpful just to stretch your brain a little bit, right? So when you start to answer, listen, ask better questions and listen to their responses, a lot of times what happens is you will see like, man, that is beneficial. I didn't know that was going on. And sometimes there is a need for a solution and you can offer that. But the key here is you want to reflect what you hear them saying, right? So this is a classic one. Like I said, I've got teenagers. This is a classic one. Everyone is going, you never let me do anything, right? So there's some absolutes in there. We might say there's some black and white thoughts in there that, probably aren't factual, right? But the feeling behind that is, hey, I feel like I'm going to be left out. I don't want to be left out. I feel like I'm being isolated. I feel like you're not letting me grow up, right? So your response might be, Our old school response might have been like, I don't care what whoever is doing. They don't live in my house. I'm not their mama. I don't care, right? But an active listening response might be like, oh, you're worried about your friends doing something without you, right? That's an active listening response because it pays attention to the feeling behind the fact. And you might go on a little bit further, like, I hear that you feel like you want to do more things. You feel like you're ready for more responsibility or more freedom. You know, here's what I'd like to see in order for that to happen. Or you might even ask, what do you think you could do to show me that you're ready for this level of freedom? Right? Okay, let's do one more. I'm gonna fail this test. Why should I even try? I just want to stay home, mom. I'm gonna fail this test today, right? Your first response might be, you're going to school, or it might be like, okay, whatever, right? You can take the makeup test, but the reflective listening is, tell me more about why you think you're gonna fail. Are you having a hard time in that class? You're anxious about the test, huh? I wonder what we can try. All of those are ways that you can reflect what you hear, go a little bit further, and maybe extend the conversation. All of those will help you in communication with your children. And like I said, these are the kind of skills that actually can help you with a spouse, a co-parent, a co-worker. When you hear someone complaining or saying something that you're like, your first reaction is to respond to them, to kind of shut it down or to eliminate the problem. If you want to improve that communication, you will go a little bit further to get just a few more details and also show them that you are actually giving them the attention that they are requesting. Now, quick question. How many positive statements does a child need to hear in order to offset one negative statement? I want you to think about that for a second. How many positive statements does a child need to hear in order to offset one negative statement? And there's no 100% tried and true guarantee on this, but a lot of researchers believe it can take as many as 5 positive statements to offset the impact of one negative one. So I want you to think about the last 6 things that you have said to your child today, this week or this month. I want you to think about how many of those would your child consider to be positive statements? How many of those would your child consider to be negative? A lot of times, especially in this crazy busy world where we have so many things going on, we think we're talking to our kids all the time. But really what we're doing is we're giving them directions. We're telling them what to do. Hey, I'm picking you up. You're sending them a text message, meet me at the front door. I'm pulling up, those kind of things. And we really aren't having that many conversations, which is why when we go to communicate, it feels like it's strained, right? So what you want to do is be really intentional with how often you are routinely saying positive things to your children. That's where we come back to that positive reinforcement, recognizing what they're doing well. When you are doing that on a consistent basis, it opens up the door for your child to communicate with you, even when there is going to be a challenge. Okay. I always tell parents to think about something kind of like a bank account, right? Your relationship with your child is kind of like a bank account, right? Every time you say something positive, you show up, you do what they need you to do, you answer their questions, you provide a resource, they feel safe with you, secure with you, they trust you. Every time that happens, you're making a deposit, right? You're making that deposit into the bank account that is your relationship. But on the flip side of that is every time there's a negative statement, every time you're having a bad day and you kind of fly off the handle, every time you have to discipline or correct them because, hey, that's part of parenting too. A lot of times that gets, experienced by them as a withdrawal. So now they feel like, hey, this relationship is bankrupt. When we see parents and children, as they become adults, and it's like, this child has gone no contact with their parents, or the parents feel like the relationship is strained, the child never comes for a visit, those kind of things. A lot of times what has happened, it wasn't that there wasn't love. It wasn't that there wasn't care or compassion. It was that the bank account just got overdrawn. Okay. So one technique that I used to share a lot of times with families that were involved with the Department of Child and Family Services, either as foster parents or kinship placements or what have you. One technique I used to give all the time was called the 10-10-10. So I'm going to give you this as we wrap up today. I'm going to give you this as a little bit of a challenge for you. The 10-10-10 is a really, really simple technique. Okay. And so what it basically says is you want to shoot for 3 10-minute increments throughout the course of your child's day where you are intentionally connecting with them, right? And the recommendation we give is 10 minutes at the start of the day, right? So whether that's 10 minutes where you're sitting on the edge of their bed or 10 minutes over breakfast, but 10 minutes at the start of their day. Then 10 minutes when you come back together after work or after school, right? So if you're picking them up from the after school program where they're riding the bus home, that's 10 minutes there where you just are really listening to them and giving them your attention, your undivided attention, if at all possible. And then 10 minutes before they go to bed. Now you see that's about 30 minutes, right? And I know as a parent, you think like, I got 4 kids. So you want me to find 2 hours a day that I'm supposed to be giving my kids one? Maybe it won't be exactly 10 minutes, but I want you to make an intentional effort to just have a couple of spots throughout the day where you are present and you are focused on nurturing your relationship with your child. Because honestly, guys, that is one of the things that makes the communication that much better, right? So, maybe you start with a couple of questions like, hey, how was your day today? Right? Very simple question. Or, I used to tell my kids, what is your high and your low of the day? What was the highest part of your day? What was the lowest part of your day? And that's just a really simple way to kind of spark some conversation, spark some dialogue. But the idea is that if you are continuously coming together, just for those brief moments of time, the connection gets maintained a little bit better. Okay. Again, and this is one of these techniques that you can use outside of just your relationship with your children. You can definitely use this with a spouse. You can do this with, extended family members. If you're an adult who says, hey, I want to try and have a better connection with my own parents, you might try something like that. But it's not about having a huge chunk of time. A small amount of time really can be a benefit for you as well. All right. So as we get ready to wrap up, if you are watching the recording of this, I would love for you to just scan this QR code. If this just lets us know, who is watching the video and what you're getting from the video. So please do complete that survey. It helps us because this is sponsored by Redeemer. They've gotten the benefit of some additional funding sources, and they do ask us for information. So this helps us to get that information out. And our final thoughts for today, I talked about if you say like, hey, things have gotten a little bit out of hand, things are pretty strained. I feel like I need to do a little bit of extra work. I feel like we need some specific attention, some specific time, some specific effort. This is what I want you to be looking at. If you're a parent, an adult, or you have a child who's an adult, the Well Counseling Group is here for you. We do have several insurance companies that we are currently partnered with. We do have openings as early as 7 days or less. And you can see the different counselors that we have available on our website. We do also accept the Redeemer 4-8 fund for counseling sessions and even for coaching sessions. If you say like, hey, things are going pretty well, but I think I just want them to get a little bit better, coaching might be an appropriate option for you. Now, if you have a child who is in need of some support, you say like, hey, I think my child needs some help. Our communication is getting better. I feel really good about working on our communication and what I can do there. But I know that my child has been struggling with some anxiety or some depression, or they are really worried about going back to school, or, they had a really hard time last year. We want you to know that there are resources available for you. The Indianapolis Counseling and Mentoring Office is a wonderful husband and wife couple who provide, full-scale family treatment, including behavior support for your children. And they do also accept that Redeemer 4-8 fund. We've had a Hope Haven and One Sensible Solution. And I do believe they are both in network with several insurance companies, including Medicaid. And then also the Children's Resource Group is a company we have referred to for several years as well. All of this is designed to support you as you support your child. There are resources that are readily available for you, so please do not hesitate to reach out. We thank you so much for your time and look forward to working with you again. Keep your eyes open for our next workshop. And if you have a request for a workshop, a training, or a course of some sort, please feel free to shoot us an email. You can do that directly through our website, which is thewellcounselinggroup.com.